Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Well, welcome to Shop Talk, everyone, for April. Don't know why this says May 21st because it's at the end of my slide deck. Jan, thanks. If you can go back to the first slide, that would be fantastic. Well, welcome to Shop Talk, everyone. If this is your first time joining us, this is the webinar for the student housing industry where we talk all things operations. We're definitely going to jump into what's happening regarding the pre-leasing season and how things are now starting to shape up as we've gotten into the last few weeks here of the spring semester. We're going to be talking about a few other things as well from a marketing standpoint. But before we get into that, I want to make sure that you guys are aware of how we conduct Shop Talk. We want this to be interactive. We want our audience to make sure that their voice is heard here as well. So a couple of things from a housekeeping standpoint, make sure that you're using the chat. Should be, if you're on your desktop, it should be over on the right-hand side. Some other platforms that might be below the screen that you're viewing me on. And then also, if you've got questions for our panel, make sure that you put them in that same comment box, but use a Q in front of it. That way, myself and Jan, my producer, will be able to highlight that for one of our questions for our panels. And then also, we're going to be just doing something a little bit different today. We're going to be utilizing a poll feature, and you'll be using chat for that as well. So we'll give you kind of a multiple choice option. You just put in 1, 2, or 3 as your answer, and it will automatically calculate that for us. So looking forward to that as well. Well, let me go really quick through today's agenda. We're going to go over upcoming industry events here in just a second. There will be no policy and legislative update. Dave and the guys at NMHC had another meeting that was going to conflict at this time. So join us next month for that. But also, there's a lot of information coming out right now as it relates to the new House bill. That is, if you're an operator in the student housing, you may also operate in BTR. There's a lot of things with that housing bill that is going to impact BTR developers and operators. So make sure that you are tuned into NMHC. Both, if you're not a member, certainly consider joining them. Make sure that you also follow them on LinkedIn. And sorry, guys, I am losing my voice. Been dealing with a call for the past couple of weeks. And then we're going to get into the national and regional pre-leasing update from College House. So Charlie Matthews will be joining us for that. And then we're going to transition into bringing on some operators. All of the panelists for that one are on the marketing side. And we're going to talk about how that data from the pre-leasing season so far, how that's impacting things from a marketing standpoint as we go into the final stretch. So lots of great things. Let's first talk about upcoming industry events. If you have not been to a BizNow, or if you haven't been paying attention to BizNow, we've got at Student Housing Insight, we've got a collaboration that we're doing with them. They're doing several summits and conferences throughout the country. And if you're here on Shop Talk and an audience member of Shop Talk, you can use ShopTalk.20 as a code to get 20% off registration. They've got 3 that are coming up in the next couple of months, one in Northern California, one in San Diego, and then one has just been announced for the Triangle region for the Carolinas. So it's going to be at the Marriott in downtown Raleigh. That's coming up in June. So make sure these are just like half-day conferences. It's really focused on the local markets with each of these. Maybe you may get some regional, but it's really the one in Raleigh. I'm sure it's going to be just covering the markets right around the Triangle region. So make sure that if you're in that area, if you've got properties in that area, that you certainly consider attending those. There's also a student and workforce housing development conference and expo. I believe this is the second year this has been in the running. This is happening out in Los Angeles. And I would say if you're in the P3 side of things, you definitely want to check this one out. And again, they are giving our Shop Talk audience a 20% discount by using that code. And then for our friends in Canada, Bonnard is doing their summit. I believe this is the third or fourth year that they've done this, but this will be in Toronto on May 28th. And they've also got a 10% discount code. You can go to our website at at studenthousinginsight.com and go to our events page, and all of those will be listed there. And with that being said, let's get into some pre-leasing info. Charlie, how are you?
Can you see me? Oh, there we are. There's two Charlies here.
There's two Charlies.
And the top right one looks a little better.
There we go. It's good to see you earlier this month, end of last month in Austin. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing good. It was very weird. I mean, lost me.
There we go.
There we go. Great event. If anyone from student housing business on here, tip of the cap. Always a great event. Felt like there's a lot of new faces this year, which was nice. But also, the same characters, which is always makes it so much fun. So it's great seeing you as well. And tuning in.
We do have Rich here.
Yeah, I keep yelling at him for the dress code. I saw less blazers and suits than in years past, but he said he's working on it for me to lighten the dress code a little bit. It's a little hot there in Austin, but it's a great event. Obviously, earlier in the year, I think we'd be there around this time, maybe last week, this time in the last handful of years, but I think it was good.
Well, I know you just got back from being outside of the country. And so welcome back to the US. How was your travels?
It was good. I tried to get the Strait of Hormuz opened for a lot longer than about 3 hours, but it's all I could get done. So I apologize that it was out there.
Well, hey, let's go ahead and jump into the info. Most of this is actually coming from the end of March.
Yes, I had a handful of my team members that we were trying to get it updated on Friday. I actually have the national metrics. They're actually they're pretty similar. But I can give like the updated stats on leasing as well as on the rate growth. But if you math this out, it's right around 1.4%, 1.3%. The current numbers as of, I think on Monday, was actually 1.8%. So I guess ticked up about $1, give or take, across the space. But I think that's been kind of the common theme here, over at least over the last, I guess, to start 2026. We saw a little bit of a drop there at the beginning of the year. I think the proactive nature of a lot of the operators seeing a little bit of a tempered lease up. Again, I like to use the broker term, tempered lease up. Made sure that they weren't, a race to the bottom as it relates to the end of the leasing cycle, like we've seen in years past, give or take. But from a rate growth perspective, you're seeing, the first time I've actually had a red number. I said this actually up on stage, and I was like, this is literally the first time in probably 4 years I've had a red number on a rate growth number. There in the Northeast, down about 1.6%. It's about the same. I think it's 1.4% right now. From a year-over-year standpoint, negative. And then everything else is plus or minus 1 to 2%. And then the Midwest again is 3.5%. But I'd say you're seeing a lot less. And I'd say in a positive note, you're seeing a lot less of the development actually happening in the Midwest, more Southeast, Southwest. So again, seeing some supply changes there, probably driving some of those rates down a little bit. And then again, the West Coast is higher cost of living. You're still relatively flat, 40 basis points, give or take. But we're probably called 5-6 weeks behind on the West Coast than where we are everywhere else from a leasing cycle perspective, just the way that the school year start there.
That's rates. We're talking about pre-lease velocity.
Yeah, from a pre-leasing perspective, this was right around 60%. I have it on another slide that shows the actual national numbers, but right now we're at 66.9%, about 2.9% behind, 2.8% give or take, which I think this shows about 2.7%, 2.8% give or take. So definitely a little, I'd say that the theme around the conference was a little less rosy around velocity and obviously every market's different, but particularly a lot of your Southwest and Southeast markets, particularly Southwest, like College Station, Texas, was in something with an Arizona in it, came up more often than not. But you're definitely seeing a little bit more of a reversion to, I guess, pre-2022, 2023 leasing, where I have the 5-year breakdown. You'll see how it kind of correlates there from like 21, 22, but 22, 23 and 23, 24 were kind of like an anomaly. If you break those out, it'd be a relatively flatter scale. So we're fundamentals still strong, and roughly about 38,000 beds, give or take, being delivered this year, about the same coming next year, and about the same coming a year after, maybe 41, 42,000 next year. But we're still seeing strong velocity. And over the last 5 years, the industry's ended up somewhere plus or minus 92% for the 270 markets we've covered. So on paper, great. But at the same time, definitely a little bit harder out there, which we'll hear definitely from our from those on the operation side. It's a little different these days, the fundamentals, X's and O's, whatever you want to say. But you're definitely seeing some tempered leasing in markets in a bigger way than you had seen in years past, especially those that are getting piled on with supply right now.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's look at this 5-year trend. And I really wish, you guys were just kind of getting things, popped off in 2019. I wish we had that line there, because I think everybody would feel so much better about where things are at today if they saw that.
Yeah. And I'd say, it's hard. Like everyone's like, oh, I need, pre-20, like obviously I wish I would have thought of the idea too. So, but as people talk to us and they're like, hey, over the last handful of years, I mean, you've added an additional, if we've averaged somewhere around 35,000 beds, 36,000 beds the last 6 years, you've added to that supply from an institutional standpoint, another 25%. And a lot of these markets, that's not like, hey, every single, call it 250,000 beds or 200,000 beds over a 6-year period, that's not split up like 700 beds per market across each one, right? There's been some that have ebbed and flowed and some that were soft, or now the ripper. Like, again, you're definitely in a different playing field as enrollment has also grown and rates have grown. So I wish I had that line as well to make my life a lot easier. But I'd say for the most part, if you, again, taking out that 23, 24, 25 numbers, we're generally speaking in line plus or minus 100 basis points or so. Again, coming off of COVID 21, 22, take that out as well. But from 22, 23, and then 25, 26 this past year, all of those years have gotten around 92% from an occupancy standpoint. Yeah. How they got there, again, is, every time there's a curveball here and there with FAFSA or international or blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, it's all ended up at around that 92% number since, since this chart was created. Yeah. And really where we're seeing a lot of this from a standpoint of like, I mean, obviously every standpoint of, I was going to say interest, but every capital group out there is, we buy in tier 1 markets and power 4 schools, right? So ultimately that's what, I mean, you're seeing from a demand standpoint, right? You have enrollment growth average of like 3.8%. In tier 1s, that's any school over 25,000 total enrollment. I always, in Georgia, I use the example like Kennesaw State University. If you may never heard of it, it is one of the largest universities in Georgia, like 40,000+ kids. It is in that tier 1 bucket, but it's not SCC or ACC like you see in Georgia State, right? You're also, again, you're seeing more beds being leased up. A lot of these markets have 5x the beds that a tier 3 market has. So they're leasing up at a higher clip, at a higher rate as well, roughly about $230 per month. The difference between like a UGA and maybe a Carrollton, Georgia, if you will, to keep it in Georgia. But ultimately, I mean, you're still seeing, I'd say from a pre-leasing perspective, again, that's a lot less beds down there on the tier 3 side. So let's put a little asterisk next to that. But the tier 1, tier 2, I mean, you're still plus or minus 2% ahead or behind, with rate growth still a green number, not something on the negative side.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting the opinion from our panel coming up on that. They got this report in advance to kind of go over and discuss. And I can tell you from the prelim call, they've got some thoughts on it. So we'll get into that shortly.
Yeah,
now,
and then again,
I was going to say this is a slide that we don't see that often from College House, maybe once or twice a year, but I think this is pretty telling on a lot of different fronts. So right here, you're breaking it down.
Yeah,
with leasing
I'd
performance,
say
both on product as well as distance.
Yeah, I know you kind of alluded to the impending nuclear bomb that might be happening in the build to rent sector, but cottage product used to be kind of like the tried and true, farther away from campus, yes, but also like the highest from an occupancy perspective. Between garden style and urban infill deals, about 200 or so of these projects around the United States that are pure purpose built student housing. Higher, premium on rents further away versus like garden style, or pedestrian assets, relative to location. But one thing that we've seen is the A word kind of find its way and sliding its way in. And if the A word being affordability, where outside of that pedestrian corridor, you're seeing relatively, stronger leasing. So like you're at 69.3%. I'd say outside the pedestrian corridors, like you got to drive to campus, you're half mile to 1 mile away, give or take, or further. You're leasing higher, or leasing faster, 0.5 to even 2 miles, at a relatively similar rate, because you've had a lot of challenges related to some of that supply and pushing rates down, et cetera, in some of these markets. But ultimately, the student's body, if you're not going to live in the pedestrian corridor, pedestrian assets, you have more options. You have, from a standpoint, a better situation related to, price points, et cetera. But ultimately giving you a little bit better, from a leasing perspective as an operator. Again, 69.3%, even a whole 1.4% increase on a velocity standpoint, 1 to 2 miles away than 0.5. So
yeah,
again, very, very interesting to see the A word creep its way in here, from a performance standpoint for the deals that are further away from campus and the stuff that's right next to it.
Right.
And then the last thing here, just breaking down the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC. Obviously, these markets are the teams you see on Saturdays in the fall, or what you just watched in March Madness. But ultimately, enrollment continues to climb at these big, prominent universities. I'd call the primary state schools. Pre-leasing, again, I'd say again, ACC, Big 10, and the SEC are not really material, but again, the Big 12, you're seeing a lot of that supply coming to those markets and behind slightly, where price points as well. You're from a standpoint, Southeast really is kind of the best from a fundamentals. The SEC, excuse me, most beds as well. You're up 5.4%. You're down 1% plus or minus on velocity, and you've seen a 5% increase in enrollment. So just looking at this from the largest schools that people are looking at, Big 12 might have some West Coast. It's kind of hard to figure out who's in what conference these days, but
it sounds like we're going back to
compare things.
Sounds like we're also going back to a Power 5 versus a Power 4. So
I know.
that would be interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, again, that was, I'd say, the first time that I sat on the interface panel and really had something. I would say it was negative,
Different.
but it wasn't. It was just different, right? Again, fundamentals are super strong, right? You're, in various markets, you're seeing a lot of supply come in. I mentioned College Station, I mentioned, Tempe, Arizona, et cetera. But for the most part, right, you've seen I think we go way back on the slides, there's like 25, 26% increase over the last 4 years from a rates perspective. Like, again, are we hitting a ceiling? In some markets, maybe, in some, no, but ultimately, I think the outlook is still strong, but and you're still underwriting rent growth. Whereas in other sectors, it's negative or flat if at best.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, perfect kind of transition to bring up our panel for this week. And we're going to be talking about, Charlie, how this did we lose Charlie? Yeah, we did. There we go.
Uh-oh.
So
I lost sound for some reason. Can you hear me?
You have? We can hear you fine, Charlie.
Okay, we're good now.
Okay. Sorry about that. I forgot you dialed back in. So yeah, that's a perfect transition to what we wanted to jump into this month as we're now heading towards the final stretch, is how that leasing data and the differences that we've all noticed this year with the velocity, how that's impacting marketing. So we've got a fantastic panel set up for this topic. I honestly couldn't have asked for a better group of ladies that could speak to this. So because they've got great portfolios, they've got great experience, and I'm looking forward to some of their answers that we're going to get from them today. So with that being said, let's turn it over to the panel for them to introduce themselves. Jessica, we'll start with you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jessica Nix. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at CLS Living. CLS Living right now has about 55 properties. There's a lot going out from transitions. There's a lot coming in. And that totals about 35,000 beds. And then for me, where I'm seeing the biggest ROI in my portfolio, I think I'm not supposed to share this information because I don't want anybody to join me here. But Lexington, Kentucky is still performing really well. Lawrence, Kansas, Columbia, Missouri, those three, I'm seeing strength still. And ironically, it does reflect in Charlie's numbers where I see strength too. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jessica. And we've got a bit of an echo. I don't know where it's coming from, if you guys are hearing it, but I went through and tried muting everybody to see if that fixed it, but it's not. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. So we'll try to get through that. But Katie, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Mancuso-Rice. I am the Vice President of Leasing and Marketing at Tailwind Group. We are vertically integrated real estate investment and student housing companies. So what does that all mean? We're at about 40 communities representing just over 19,000 beds, 17 states, and 25 universities. And my department and role within the company really is the intersection of marketing and leasing performance. So we think about how do we translate how students and parents are making decisions, how are they interacting with brands, what is that customer experience, into what our teams, both at the corporate level and the site level, can execute. So, our physical curb appeal and our digital curb appeal are aligned to really drive leasing performance.
Great. Tasha? She's on mute. Hold on.
Oh, no. Now can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Do over. Good afternoon. I'm Tasha Rogers. I'm the SVP of Marketing at Cardinal Group. We have about a portfolio of about 115,000 beds, about 260 student assets nationwide. Some of our top markets are College Station, Columbia, and Tallahassee. If I think about where the ROI is really making an impact this year on the marketing side of things, I really think about it kind of as a trifold, and I think we'll talk a lot about this today in terms of that prospect journey that we're seeing today is so complicated and is made up of so many different touch points, online and offline. So what I'm seeing being most impactful is when they're all working together. So like the outreach efforts are right in tandem with the digital marketing effort, right in tandem with the self-guided tour messaging, and they're all kind of having a really consistent thread. When we have all those pieces dialed in, that's really where the magic starts to happen. So it's that multi-tiered, strong marketing plan that's really making the bang for the buck from an ROI perspective.
Well, hey, before we get into some of the questions that I've got for you, I want to just go back to Charlie's report, and as we mentioned, there's a couple other slides there that we don't typically see in that summary report. What are some initial takeaways and thoughts that you have regarding that data? Anything that stood out specifically?
I can jump in. Tempered, I like that word. Tempered is what we're going to call this. The great calibration. It is tough. I do feel like in some markets we've hit, in previous seasons, a price point ceiling, if you will, where we are encouraging them to go find, shadow market housing, or they're just concerned about what the future holds. So they're not going for the biggest and the best. They're a little more price conscious, out of concern for what the future holds. And I do see that, Power 4, yes, strength there. I do think that we know now that they go there for the total experience, not just for education. So that makes perfect sense. But when I see that, there's growth in tier 3, there's growth in garden style, to me, it's the A word again. It's affordability. And that's what I'm seeing too, where people are making, in my markets, it seems like they're making more conservative. They're either signing slower because it's a more conservative, thoughtful, researched approach, or they are being conservative with their price points and their budget of what they're willing to pay for right now. So I think that is reflected in the different slides. Thinking about what those numbers mean, I can see that trend.
Okay. And Charlie, I muted your mic. I think that might have been where it was coming from, but we'll, I think that was it. Okay, great. Katie, Tashi, anything else you guys want to expand on as far as takeaways?
Yeah. Oh, Katie, all you.
I was going to say the headline we're really seeing as I evaluate the data that Charlie was presenting at the front of the show is really, and contextualize that against the data we're seeing internally and then zoom out, right? We're seeing a return towards a more normalized leasing pattern. And the nuance is really how segmented performance is market by market. At a high level, at Tailwind, we're pacing ahead year over year by about 15 points. Now, I caveat, don't get too scared or excited about that number because that's not a perfect comp. Our strategy is, really big value add push. So, those numbers are skewed with that contextualization, but we're really seeing that the leasing curve looks very different than what we've seen in the past 2 years, in the past 3 years. And the performance market by market, some are outperforming. Some are behind, and how we go into the summer season is very different than what we used to in years past. So we really are spending a lot of time contextualizing, zooming out when we're evaluating the data.
Jessica and Katie nailed it. Maybe I'll reiterate a couple of points here, but certainly seeing the same and feeling the same trend over here. I think Cardinal is trending probably slightly behind last year, but there are pockets that are crushing it. And it's so market dependent. It's like, what conversation are we talking about today? We could be riding a high in one call and then really scraping ourselves off the ground on the next call because it's like, oh crap, this is not what we expected to see right now. How are we pivoting? So I think but even in that, I think even in the past 2 to 3 weeks, we've really started to see momentum start to take hold. So we're just reminding ourselves of what the normal actually was. And I think Katie just zooming out and just being like, oh, right, last year was probably not a great benchmark for us to hang on to, and remembering what life was like before it felt so easy is probably where we're at overall. I'll also echo Katie's thoughts on just the cottage market. We're also seeing that the vintage style markets that are probably a little bit further away from campus. I won't say easy breezy, but we got that. It's feeling good. We got what we needed out of it, and we're definitely focused on those more challenging markets where there's a lot of compression, there's a lot of supply, and we're having to pull out all the stops to be a differentiator in the market.
Hey, I want to get to it's actually a second question that I sent to you guys, but I want to go through it because I want to make sure we're get some feedback from Charlie on this and what he's seeing over at College House. But back in February, we talked on Shop Talk about what's happening in College Park, Maryland. It's something similar that we saw in Michigan a few months previous, where there was legislation put in place by the local city, where they're limiting when landlords can actually ask for a renewal. And it's specifically targeted for student housing operators and wanting them to, based off of what they're hearing from their student population about being pressured to renew basically as soon as they move in. And then you guys sent me what I'm going to call our, let me bring it up here if I can. Hold on just a second. There we go. I'm titling this the Many of You letter from the University of Alabama, and this came out I think a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly. A lot of your property managers, if you're in Tuscaloosa, probably got this, but it's from someone that's involved with off-campus services and some. It's in response. I don't know what it's really in response to. They don't really go into it. But they start breaking out, hey, there's plenty of beds in the market. There doesn't need to be this pressure of trying to sign in early, certainly early fall, from their perspective. But this came out last month, so it seems like prime time for me, especially in Tuscaloosa. I'm a little concerned about their numbers here. I don't know what the source is. They mentioned off-campus resources, that there's 32,000 student housing beds available off-campus. Available. I'm not exactly sure what that word means either in this context. From off-campus resources, I don't know if that's a department. I don't know if there's off-campus partners. It's part of CoStar. That number, Charlie, I wanted to talk to you about that. From a PBSH standpoint, you guys are really just reporting anything over, I think, 100 beds. There's not 32,000 beds, unless if you're counting the shadow market. Do you think it's that big?
So they have, Tuscaloosa is unique. Athens is similar. Auburn's also similar. A lot of your big SEC, Clemson, name your bigger SEC or Southeast school. You have a lot of companies, like people have been, the family business since 1970 that bought on Paul Bear Bryant Drive, and they built a quadplex. It was a 4-bedroom, 16 beds in the building, 4. Again, they market to the university just as anyone else does, as student housing, but it's shadow. We cut it off at 100 because you can't get every individual one of those from a collection standpoint. And ultimately too, like it goes into the whole conversation around shadow market of, right, hey, any single family rental in town, is that actually student housing? Maybe, I think they'd take whatever they can get if they have that kind of property. But as far as like inventory goes, anything over 100 beds, 80 beds, generally speaking, is what we're calling purpose-built student housing. I think they're including the houses, townhomes, and everything in between. There's not a lot of like conventional apartments really in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, but I think that's where that number is coming from. Because if you look at, I actually was looking at their like the off-camp, like what shows up, it's houses, townhomes, condos, etc. That also fall into the bucket on the listing sites, including the purpose-built inventory. So, are there 32,000? Sure, but for the stuff that the relevant groups here manage in those markets, I think there hadn't really been a new delivery in Tuscaloosa, Alabama in many, many years. I think the last one was the Gray Star deal, Union on something, not Broadway. That was in what do you call it? That was in Eugene, but same year. But long story short, I think they're including the actual homes and townhomes and party houses that are synonymous with a lot of those big SEC schools.
Yeah. Well, and I don't like getting. I was just going to say I don't like getting into a lot of market specific stuff on Shop Talk. I kind of want to stay away from that. I don't want to pull our operators in to talk specifically about Tuscaloosa. But what I am seeing is this trend of maybe the students are a little just, maybe they're calling the bluff. In some cities, there's certainly not a bluff. There's a real housing urgency, especially if you want to be close to campus. But it seems like everybody's pushing back and saying, "Hey, I don't want to make a rush decision." And so the question I had for you guys is, how has the student decision-making window changed this year, and what does that force you to do differently from a marketing standpoint? And yes, if you've got something that you want to expand on regarding Tuscaloosa, feel free to, but I wasn't going to ask you anything specifically about Tuscaloosa or College Park or any specific market.
Well, two things more to the concept of what's going on. And you mentioned it, like I'm in Ann Arbor, I'm in College Park, I'm in Tuscaloosa. Not only are people saying there's plenty of housing, but then it's different. It's when the university is telling their students there's plenty of housing, so don't feel pressured. So they're coming at us saying, stop pressuring. Okay, fine, but I'm going to fill my beds. And if that means I got to do what I got to do, so be it. But then we're seeing like these two leasing cycles where you have the ones that are not freshmen. They're probably returning, maybe sophomores going into junior year. They'll renew on time. They'll take care of their business. And then I have a drought. And then it picks back up again. And it seems like, I mean, even Kennesaw, Texas State, there's just, you can tell that the university hasn't said something yet this year. And then you cross over that line when they start saying, okay, fresh or upperclassmen dorm space is no longer. And now all of a sudden you see it in your own numbers in traffic. And then you start seeing it, in what is available to us in our comp traffic. So the universities, they've always had control. But it's interesting year over year, you can tell what they're communicating to the students in that it literally directly affects momentum in the market of they're telling you to wait. They're telling you not to feel pressured. And then boom, March hits and they're like, okay, now just do your research. Don't shop one and sign. Make sure you shop them all. So I think that the ladies will also, we talked about this a lot. They're putting the effort in from initial research, initial tour, and our urgency tactics are being challenged more than ever before. The 24-hour signing, 48-hour is harder than ever because they are going to take their time and shop around and be fully educated before they sign.
Do you see those urgency tactics just being a complete turnoff for anybody?
I don't know that necessarily it's a turnoff per se, but it's more of a shift in the decision window. Like students and their parents feel more comfortable waiting. So those old urgency messaging that we used to have, or 24-hour, 48-hour look and lease approaches, they're just not landing the same. They're calling our bluff on it. And whether they're hearing it from, their friends, whether they're hearing it from universities, or even if they're doing their own research on Reddit or what LLMs are feeding up and serving up to them, they believe and are confident and comfortable in waiting. So it's being really mindful that more information isn't going to speed up their decisions. It's actually going to slow them down. And, if we're really, again, zooming out and looking at past couple of years, if we were a couple of years ago heading into the summer at 75-80% pre-leased, we'd feel great about that. And so I think that concern right now with this decision-making and urgency shift is more about recency bias from the last couple of cycles than really like a market trust issue or a market urgency issue. So what we're doing is we're focusing on utilizing a more prolonged leasing curve and how that shifts our pricing strategy. So we're not necessarily treating this as a slower cycle, but it's a different cycle, and being mindful of how that brand messaging, how that marketing messaging hits for our students and their parents.
Hey, Tashi, before you go, I want to launch this. This is I think the first ever poll that we've done on this particular platform, StreamYard. So want to test this out, but I want to throw this poll question out to everybody. Compared with last year, is your average time from first tour to signed lease, is it longer, about the same, or shorter? So if you just go to the comment section and put in 1, 2, or 3 based off of what your experience is, would love to see that. All right, Tasha, go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me. I was just going to talk about actually, Katie was definitely along the same lines there. And I like where we're thinking of how do we dial in this kind of getting away from the urgency messaging, because that's not necessarily what our people aren't getting compelled to take action there. But what we can do is set ourselves apart from the competition and really be thoughtful about what our value proposition is, and take a moment to create a story, a story that we can tell throughout all of the channels that are consistent, that's going to resonate with the people that we want to have live in our communities. And I think in the past few years, kind of going back to what we didn't have to do is spend time on the upfront messaging, because it was all just oh, here's your lease, here's your lease, here's your lease. Now we're like, oh, let me tell you why this is the best place for you to live, because we can offer you all of the amenities and the location and the community and the sense of belonging that is going to make your experience at college the best you could ever imagine, right? We have to think about what that story is, and then start from the very beginning, from all of those touch points that I mentioned earlier, and make sure that message is consistent. That the time spent on that marketing strategy is, in my opinion, more important than ever, because if we don't have that dialed in, if it's disconnected at any step, they're going to forget about us, because there's a lot of other options for them to pursue that could be doing that much better to get that across the finish line.
Yeah, so it looks like 80% are reporting longer. And if I know a lot of folks in the audience are not property managers, and it looks like we've got mostly some of the names I'm seeing here. I know they're property managers, but from a portfolio standpoint too, would love for our regional managers, portfolio directors that are listening to put their thoughts on here as well, at least, kind of from what they're seeing across their portfolio. But, so
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Wes, I was going to jump in and ask Katie. So when I hear you say like prolonged leasing, and you're considering that in like, your rate strategy, is that essentially meaning that everybody's going to be patient and you're not going to freak out and cut out of fear? What does that mean?
Well, for what I can share, it's really market to market. And I think, we bring up a really good point of what is the unique business plan for each deal, right? And how do we make sure that our pricing approach is mindful of a different curve? So I would say I can't go into further specifics beyond that, but we're being far more intentional and approaching our pricing entirely differently than we used to in the past. Same with when we think about traditional versus digital marketing. We talk about, really understanding your brand. We're just thinking about each of these levers differently to match our consumers, to match our customers and what their behaviors are, and insert any other industry that they're behaving on. So we're being mindful of all of that type of user behavior.
Great. So guys, I want to go to the next question. Certainly at Interface, and I would even go back to LeaseCon, TurnCon back in December, I keep hearing on these panels that there's this return to traditional marketing, and what do I mean by traditional marketing, or what do those people say that they mean about traditional marketing? It's more of the on the ground, dorm storming, pop-ups, and what I guess the question I wanted to put out there in front of you guys, because we've got 2 to 3 more weeks left in this semester, but let me find my question here. It's this. What does traditional marketing mean in practical terms for the next 90 to 120 days? Or are you planning for a transition to more digital marketing as we move into the summer months?
I would say for us, it really isn't an either or, but it's how are they working together, and how is that intentionally, I love how we were talking about earlier, the full year. What is that brand story? What is that customer experience story throughout the entire decision-making journey? So, our digital environment is creating an expectation, and the in-person experience has to deliver on that.
Yeah.
Right? So whether we're going on campus, whether we're creating an event that both residents and prospects can come to to, our intention is how do we deliver campaigns that really act on emotions? And, we're going on campus even more than we used to. We're seeing the data back that there's value in that. If you zoom out beyond student housing, 85% of consumers are more likely to make a purchase. So for us, making a living decision after a lived brand experience. So the data is there and showing that that's what's going to really push out success. Now, you need to make sure and always be mindful of that physical and digital curb appeal, right? So I want to caution and, without giving out trade secrets, be mindful of how do you do both and how do you do both really well so that experience is synonymous wherever that customer is in their decision-making journey.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Katie. I feel like we're saying we're like living the same life right now. The flip side of that is the on-site experience, or the physical experience of traditional marketing happens, but then it needs to be the digital experience needs to validate that yes. Okay, future state, I can expect that to happen. I'm getting consistent messaging and information online. So it's all got to connect together. That consistency factor is so important right now, regardless of where they start and where they end up, because they're going to touch and they're going to intersect all the time.
I'll put another poll question out just to get the audience feedback on that. Compared to last year, has your digital marketing spend decreased? Is it about the same or increased? So would love to see your answers in the chat on that.
And I was going to chime in on the ground game. What we are talking about internally, what I've been talking about at interface with peers in the industry is making sure that our teams remember how to market and what the definition of that, and not just doing for them all digitally. Like, are we thinking, is it, what is the feedback that you're getting from the field, and how does that compare to the, analytics that you're getting with digital? I still think it's an absolute gift to be in student housing and to know that in some way a large population of your target audience is tethered to that campus. I know that there's a lot of my potential customers in those dorms. There's a lot at my competitors. There's a lot on campus, give or take, depending on the day. And that's why you need to layer your marketing mix to get in front of them all. But then also we run in 2-week sprints. And if we execute against our marketing plans, I can feel confident that it's not awareness. Awareness is not my problem. So what is my problem? Is it rate? Is it promotion? Is it, product? It's, going to the classic, marketing principles. But we absolutely are very much pushing our people out the door and saying, if they're not coming in your door, you can even get in front of digital by, you have a few weeks left, they're still there. I am still having extremely successful tabling events where I can get a lot of guest cards with people that tell me their intent that, do they have housing or do they not? So I'm old school. I love the face-to-face, no matter the nuances of the generation. And if, Gen Alpha wants to make eye contact with you or not, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to, build rapport and, get that relationship going and try to convert that into a piece of traffic. But still kind of pre-COVID, get out there and fight for it. Somebody's going to have empty beds. I don't want them to be mine. So let's put forth the effort and get out there. Digitally speaking, I think that we are not spending less, but we're diversifying how we spend digitally. There's a lot of things we've heard of, geofencing, or you can do retargeting. You can do the classic, pay-per-click on search and social. What can I invest, although it's not advertising, but what can I invest, whether on my website or other tactics, to perform better in large language models? So I'm not allowed to spend more. I'm just needing to prioritize differently how I spend my budget.
And I think it's really important, in addition to looking at where you're spending those dollars, you have to look at your data differently as well. You have to look at multi-touch attribution. You have to be able to articulate the impact of both your digital and your physical experiences when you go on campus. And gosh, for those of us that were following along Coachella the past 2 weeks, Pinterest rolled out an experience that was fully analog and you had to give up your phones. So we know also the next generation and our customers are craving those in-person connections. They're craving that type of experience with your brand. But I would encourage, while you're looking at ad spend, you have to look at also like a diversified approach to that multi-touch attribution. And I always go back to experiential data, kind of zooming out of our industry. And really, it's also been proven 64% of our customers, when they engage with us at those tabling events, when they engage with us at those housing fairs or any type of in-person experience, that positive impression lasts up to a month, right? So you can't just track, okay, how many leases or how many leads did I get today when I was on campus? You have to be looking, zooming out in the future too. Okay, what was that impact for the next month as well? So I think the marketers and the companies that are standing out on top are being able to also measure it in a different way, just like we're looking at the leasing curve in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to go to my next question. You know that I talk to a lot of regional managers and a lot of asset managers, and I've talked to a lot of them over the past month, both with Interface Conference happening, but even a lot of ramp up to things that they were planning on talking about at Interface. And there seems to be a lot of tension right now as it relates to concessions and incentives. And so I wanted to ask you this question. How are you thinking about concessions versus rate integrity in this part of the season? And at what point do you pull that lever? Who wants to jump in first with that one?
I'll start. So I think that we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, and I think it's such a micro conversation to give broad brushstrokes and in generalities here, I think would not serve us well. I think it's so market specific and client specific and situational specific, where we're going through our hit list of, okay, did we look at lead generation? How's that performing? Okay, are we looking at tours? How is our tour path like really being received? How can we dial that in? Like, we're going through all of the different checkpoints of the prospect journey and saying, are we optimized fully here? Or do we have an opportunity to maximize impact? Or is it actually, if we change rate or offer concession, that's going to be the driver? So I think it's kind of our last resort, if you will, but also really very much appreciating the tolerance of risk involved if we wait versus pull the trigger now versus what does that look like and what does that impact? At the end of the day, a lot of time it's about occupancy. So if we're willing to sacrifice a little bit on rate to get the occupancy, and we feel like we've addressed all of the other levers, then that makes good sense, and we feel like we did the best we could before we got to that point and pulled the levers. So it's very micro, every day, every conversation, thinking about all of the inputs before we take that output.
I would say that I'm having to, not now, but none of us want to let go of the beautiful rates that we've climbed up to. And so, again, it was like, well, can you try to get the numbers to move it by doing a gift card instead? We can try. And then, you sit there and you analyze, was it effective enough? And it is very different depending on the asset, depending on the owner. Are you a value play? Are you not, on what you do? I mean, if you are in Greensboro, North Carolina, and bottom line price is what is your top priority, then I need an effective rate. But we are having to experiment. We are trying to pull out the hoopla. Let's give some prizes out. Let's do a tech package. Let's do a swag basket with some high-end stuff from the university. We are trying to do everything we can to move the needle without giving up rental rate growth. But I do feel like it's the great calibration where, I can get away with that. In some of my markets, it's just as beautiful as it's ever been. Some of them, it's like gaming between what I can get away with marketing dollars. And then I am unfortunately having to recalibrate rates in some situations where it's just what the market is demanding.
Completely agree. And you're spot on. And just as much as we need to spend time in investing, what is like our brand voice, visual identity, really, what is that ethos? We need to understand our customers in each market that way too, right? Do our customers want to feel like they got a deal? Or do they want to feel like they got something about, how do we get creative with adjusting that conversion funnel? So I think it's really important to make sure you do your ample research on understanding your customers. So when you play that game of concession, rate, and just like that concept of getting a deal doesn't always need to play into those two categories alone.
Now, Katie, you guys do, if you do any third party at Tailwind, it's very, very little. There's no tension between your regionals and your asset managers, is there?
Oh, there's absolutely. And we actually are encouraging. That's healthy tension. We should come to the table and have difference of opinion and be able to duke it out. And I encourage teams all the time, like, see it through the frame of reference of you're not being questioned. They're asking questions because they want to understand the customer. Asset management wants to understand boots on the ground feedback. So I actually think, if it's all sunshine and roses, it's not a healthy tension and you're not driving your business forward. So, let's come to the table ready to duke it out in a really productive and healthy manner.
Productive and healthy. All right. Last question, ladies. Looking ahead to the rest of the leasing season, what is the one metric your teams are watching most closely each week to decide whether your strategy is working? And Charlie, I said ladies, but if you want to input on that, feel free to.
I can jump in. The obvious: traffic, leasing. It's a blurry closing conversion ratio in the way that we have so many people in and out. But at this time of the year, I need to see completed leases and, watch out for the no-show. I heard from somebody I was speaking to on campus, and she's like, but then there's the melt. I was like, oh, I like the way you said that, the melt. So it's not a problem. It's not equal across the board. It's usually in a value place situation, but I need, for those that have a long closing time and a short closing time, everybody needs to button it up. And then I need to make sure I fill every bed that's going to show up and pay. So we are in no-show season. We just kicked it off at our company.
All right, Tashi.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo Jessica, but also say I think that I'm looking every day at like those prospect journey metrics. So you said one metric, I'm looking at all those. It's the micro. It's a game of inches right now. Every time the lead to tour percentage goes down or up based on what I want it to be, it's a conversation of, okay, we had this pivot, we had this flux, what are we doing about it? Or we're celebrating that success and we're moving on to the next touch point in that prospect journey. Because if we can continue to make strides throughout that prospect journey and what we want that prospect to do at every step of the way, the better off we're going to be on getting the leases that we need signed before it's time for moving.
Yeah, I would have to definitely agree. It's hard to pick just one metric. There are so many metrics that we're keeping our eyeballs on, but it's really looking at that window, kind of speaking to what both of you are saying and looking at what is that first touch to signed lease experience? How many different lead sources are impacting that journey and making sure that our strategy is involved and weaved throughout that experience. But I love that, the melt, because that's what keeps me up at night. That also wakes me up in the morning, is really kind of what is that completed leases number, and is it moving in the right direction fully? So I definitely would agree.
Well, everyone, Charlie and these three ladies, thank you so much for giving your time today to speak with the ShopTalk audience and the industry about how things are wrapping up here at the end of the semester and what you guys are thinking about moving forward. And look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. I'm going to kick you guys off stage. Thanks, everybody. And we'll go to really quick talk about what's coming up. The next Shop Talk will be on Thursday, May 21st. So make sure that you put that on your calendar. And also want to just say, hey, if you got any value out of this today, please share it with your colleagues. Make sure that that they and everyone else within your companies are signed up to receive our invites each month for Shop Talk. You can do that at ShopTalk.Info. Again, that's ShopTalk.Info to sign up for that. And that way you'll make sure that you get an invite to register each and every single month. And with that being said, we will see you guys in May, and make sure that you make it a great end of the semester, everyone. keeping my fingers crossed and keeping you guys in my thoughts. And let's end it well. Take care.